What happens when a single wrong turn seals your fate? They said the ghost of Chicago's underworld didn't exist, that the city's most brutal syndicate was run by a shadow. But when an exhausted event planner pushed open Suite 402, she didn't just find the shadow. She saw his soul. The Waldorf Astoria in Chicago was a fortress of quiet luxury, a place where fortunes changed hands over crystal glasses of Macallan 25, and secrets were buried under plush, sound-absorbing carpets. For Chloe Bennett, it was just another high-stakes Tuesday. As the lead coordinator for Elite Gala Productions, she was currently managing a multi-million-dollar charity auction for Finley Harley, a hedge fund billionaire with a temper shorter than a lit fuse. It was 9:45 p.m. The champagne was flowing in the grand ballroom downstairs, but a crisis had erupted. The silent auction's prized item, a vintage Cartier necklace, lacked its authentication paperwork. Harley had barked at Chloe to fetch it from his private suite on the 4th floor. He had shoved a magnetic keycard into her hand. Suite 402, he had grunted, his face flushed with vintage Bordeaux. Chloe stepped off the private elevator, her sensible black heels sinking into the thick corridor runner. The 4th floor was eerily silent, a stark contrast to the pulsating bass of the string quartet downstairs. She checked the gold-plated numbers on the mahogany doors. 401. 402. She swiped the card. The light blinked green. A heavy click echoed in the quiet hall. Chloe pushed the door open, stepping into a dimly lit foyer that smelled faintly of expensive cedarwood and, strangely, metallic copper. "Mr. Harley?" she called out, her voice barely above a whisper. "I have the..." The words died in her throat. She had not walked into Finley Harley's suite. The sprawling living area was stripped of its usual hotel warmth. Heavy blackout curtains were drawn tight. In the center of the room, kneeling on a sheet of heavy industrial plastic laid over the Persian rug, was a man. His face was a bruised, bloody pulp, his hands zip-tied behind his back. Standing over him were two men built like freight trains, wearing impeccably tailored charcoal suits, their hands resting casually on the grips of suppressed Glock 19 tucked into their waistbands. But it was the man sitting in the leather wingback chair who stole the breath from Chloe's lungs. For years, the Chicago Tribune and the FBI had chased a ghost. They called him the Architect. He was the head of the Costello Syndicate, a criminal empire that controlled everything from the docks to the high-rise casinos. There were no photographs of him, no wiretaps, just whispers of a man who ruled from the dark. The man in the chair leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. He was breathtakingly handsome, with a jawline carved from granite and dark, heavy-lidded eyes that held the terrifying absolute calm of a predator. He wore a crisp white dress shirt, the sleeves rolled up to his forearms, revealing a canvas of dark, intricate tattoos that clashed violently with his aristocratic demeanor. "I asked you a question, Silas," the man said. His voice was a low, resonant baritone that sent a shiver straight down Chloe's spine. "Did you really think the Moretti family could pay you enough to hide from me?" The bloody man on the floor sobbed. "Marley, please. Costello, I swear to God." Chloe's clipboard slipped from her numb fingers. It hit the hardwood border of the floor with a loud, sharp clack. Time stopped. The two armed guards whipped around, their weapons drawn and leveled at Chloe's chest in a fraction of a second. Chloe froze, her heart hammering wildly against her ribs. The air in the room grew instantly heavy, suffocating. Marley Costello slowly turned his head. His dark eyes locked onto hers. For a terrifyingly long moment, neither of them moved. Chloe felt entirely stripped bare under his gaze. This was the face no one had ever seen. The face of the city's most dangerous phantom, and she was staring right at it. "Well," Marley murmured, the silence stretching so tight it threatened to snap. He didn't look angry. He looked dangerously intrigued. He slowly stood up, towering over the scene, his commanding presence filling the room. He checked the gold Patek Philippe watch on his left wrist. "This is a complication." "Boss," one of the guards, a man with a jagged scar across his eyebrow, growled. "She saw everything. She saw you." Chloe's survival instinct finally kicked in. I'm sorry," she stammered, taking a step back, her hand fumbling behind her back for the doorknob. "Wrong room. I have the wrong room. I'm an event planner. I work downstairs. I didn't see anything. I swear to you, I don't know who you are." Marley stepped over the plastic tarp, closing the distance between them with the silent, fluid grace of a hunting cat. He stopped just inches from her. Up close, he smelled of mint, dark tobacco, and danger. "You're shaking, sweetheart," Marley noted softly, reaching out. His large, warm hand wrapped around her wrist, stopping her from turning the doorknob. His grip was entirely inescapable, yet surprisingly gentle. "And you're lying. You know exactly who I am. I can see it in your eyes." Chloe swallowed hard, tears of pure terror pricking the corners of her eyes. "Please." Marley studied her face, his gaze tracing the terrified lines of her features. He looked over his shoulder at the man bleeding on the floor, then back to Chloe. "Leo," Marley said, his eyes never leaving Chloe's. "Clean up Silas. Take him to the warehouse. We're done here for tonight." "And the girl?" Leo asked, stepping forward, his gun still out. "Standard protocol, boss. She's a liability." Chloe squeezed her eyes shut, waiting for the gunshot. She thought of her small apartment in Logan Square, of her cat, of the unfinished gala downstairs. This was how she was going to die, because Finley Harley couldn't be bothered to hand her the right keycard. "No," Marley said, his thumb absent-mindedly brushing against the pulse point on her wrist, feeling her heart racing like a trapped bird. "No standard protocol. Bring her to the penthouse at the St. Regis." Chloe's eyes flew open. "What?" "No, I have a job. I have people waiting for me." Marley leaned in close, his lips brushing the shell of her ear. "The men Silas works for just saw you walk into my private sanctuary. If I let you walk back out that door, you'll be dead before you reach the lobby. You belong to me now." The ride to the St. Regis was a blur of neon city lights and suffocating silence. Chloe sat in the back of a heavily armored black Maybach, flanked by Marley on her right, and the terrifyingly silent Leo in the front passenger seat. The partition was up. Chloe stared out the tinted window, her mind racing through 100 different scenarios, all of them ending in her demise. She subtly reached for her velvet clutch, praying her phone was still inside. "If you're thinking of calling the police, I'd strongly advise against it," Marley said, his voice slicing through the dark interior. He was pouring a drink from the car's built-in crystal decanter. "Half the precinct captains in this city are on my payroll. The other half are terrified of me. A 911 call will just serve as a beacon to my enemies." Chloe turned to look at him. In the passing streetlights, his profile was sharp and unforgiving. "Why did you bring me here? If I'm such a liability, why didn't you just let your man shoot me?" Marley took a slow sip of amber liquid, his eyes hooded. "Do you think I enjoy killing innocent women who get handed the wrong hotel keycard?" "You're a Mafia boss," Chloe shot back, the adrenaline overriding her common sense. "I assume you don't lose sleep over collateral damage." A dark, genuine chuckle rumbled in Marley's chest. "Spirited. I like that." But you misunderstand your situation, Miss Bennet. He knew her name. Of course he did. He had taken her ID from her purse before they left the Waldorf. Silas, Marley continued, his tone shifting into something strictly business, was a rat. He was feeding information to the Moretti family. The Morettis are brutal, undisciplined animals, and Silas had a live wire open on his phone to them when you walked into that room. Chloe felt the blood drain from her face. They heard me. They heard you, Marley confirmed. They heard a woman interrupt an interrogation with Marley Costello, and they heard me spare her life. In their world, I don't spare anyone, which means to them, you aren't a mistake. You are someone important to me, a confidant, a lover, a weakness. But I'm not, Chloe protested, her voice breaking. I'm nobody. To me, yes. To them, you are a gold mine of leverage, Marley stated coldly. If I drop you off at your apartment, the Morettis will have you in a van by morning. They will peel you apart, piece by piece, to find out what you know about my operations, my safe houses, my face. And when you can't tell them anything, they will kill you simply to send me a message. The Maybach smoothly descended into a private, subterranean parking garage. The heavy steel doors rolled shut behind them, sealing them in. So what? Chloe asked, her voice trembling as the reality of her nightmare settled in. You're keeping me as a prisoner? I am keeping you alive, Marley corrected, turning to fully face her. For the foreseeable future, you are going to be exactly what the Morettis think you are. You are going to be my weakness, my public obsession. Chloe stared at him, bewildered. You want me to pretend to be your girlfriend? Are you insane? I want you to be visible, Marley said, his eyes narrowing slightly. The Morettis strike in the shadows. If you are bathed in the spotlight, attached to my arm, they can't touch you without declaring open war on the Costello Syndicate, a war they know they cannot win. The car stopped. Leo opened Marley's door. Before stepping out, Marley leaned back in, his gaze dropping to her lips before meeting her eyes again. Tomorrow, I am hosting the Metropolitan Museum Charity Gala. It is a highly publicized event, a front for my legitimate businesses. You are an event planner. You will oversee the final details, and you will stand by my side. You will smile. You will look at me as if I hung the moon. And in exchange, my men will ensure you keep breathing. He offered her his hand. It wasn't a request. Chloe looked at his large, calloused palm. Taking it meant stepping into a world of violence, deception, and a man who was as intoxicating as he was lethal. But refusing it meant certain death at the hands of ghosts she couldn't even see. Taking a deep, trembling breath, Chloe placed her hand in his. His fingers closed around hers, a warm, iron vice. He pulled her out of the car and into the private elevator. As the doors closed, ascending to the 72nd floor, Marley let go of her hand, stepping back to his corner of the elevator. The physical distance between them was back, but the psychological tether had just been securely fastened. Welcome to my world, Chloe, Marley said softly as the elevator chimed at the penthouse. Try not to break. The transformation took exactly 4 hours. When Chloe finally looked in the floor-to-ceiling mirror of the St. Regis master bathroom, she didn't recognize the woman staring back. The sensible event planner with her practical bun and understated makeup was gone. In her place stood a woman draped in a custom, backless crimson silk gown by Givenchy. A diamond collar, cold and heavy, rested against her collarbone. A loan from Marley's personal vault, he had casually mentioned, as if handing over $2 million in stones was an everyday occurrence. Her dark hair cascaded in loose, old Hollywood waves, and her lips were painted a deep, dangerous red. She looked like a queen. She felt like a hostage. Marley stood in the doorway, already dressed in a midnight blue Tom Ford tuxedo that fit his broad shoulders with lethal precision. He didn't say a word for a long minute. His dark eyes swept over her, taking in every detail, and for a fraction of a second, the cold, calculating mask of the architect slipped. There was a raw, primal hunger there that made Chloe's breath hitch. "You look," Marley started, his voice a low gravel before clearing his throat. "You look exactly as you need to. Convincing." "If I trip in these heels, the illusion is going to shatter," Chloe muttered, trying to mask her paralyzing fear with dry sarcasm. Marley crossed the room, the scent of expensive tobacco and cedarwood wrapping around her. He stopped behind her, his gaze meeting hers in the mirror. He reached out, his warm fingers lightly brushing the bare skin of her lower back, sending an electric shock straight up her spine. "You won't trip," he said softly, his mouth close to her ear. "Because I won't let you fall. Tonight, we are a united front. If anyone asks, we met 3 months ago in Milan. You didn't know who I was. I pursued you relentlessly. You are the only thing in this world I care about. And if Victor Moretti doesn't buy it?" "Victor is a snake," Marley replied, his eyes hardening. "He sees deceit everywhere because he is deceitful himself. But he also understands obsession. We just need to give him a performance he can't ignore." The Metropolitan Charity Gala was held at the Field Museum. The Grand Hall, usually echoing with the footsteps of tourists, had been transformed into a decadent ballroom. Waiters in white coats circulated with trays of Dom Perignon, and the city's elite, politicians, CEOs, socialites, mingled under the shadow of the massive dinosaur skeletons. The moment Marley and Chloe stepped onto the grand staircase, the atmosphere in the room shifted. It was palpable. Conversations died out. Heads turned. The architect had never brought a woman into the public eye. "Smile, sweetheart," Marley murmured, his hand resting firmly on the curve of her waist. "The wolves are watching." Chloe forced the corners of her mouth up, channeling every ounce of corporate composure she possessed. They descended the stairs, and almost immediately the sea of high society parted for them. It was a terrifying display of power. People didn't just respect Marley Costello, they feared him on a visceral level. Within 20 minutes, they were intercepted. "Marley, it's been too long." The voice was slick, oiled with false charm. Chloe turned to see a man in a silver-grey suit, his hair slicked back, a predatory smile playing on his lips. He was surrounded by 4 men who clearly weren't there to bid on silent auction items. "Victor," Marley said, his tone perfectly neutral. He didn't extend his hand. "I wasn't aware modern art was to your taste. I thought you preferred messier hobbies." Victor Moretti laughed, a sharp, barking sound. His eyes darted immediately to Chloe, stripping her down with a gaze so vile she felt an urge to step behind Marley. "And I wasn't aware you had a taste for such delicate things. Introduce me to your lovely companion." Marley's grip on Chloe's waist tightened fractionally, a silent warning. "This is Chloe. Chloe, this is Victor, a business acquaintance." "Chloe," Victor purred, stepping closer. "Tell me, how does a beautiful woman like you end up with a ghost like Marley? He doesn't strike me as the romantic type." The trap was set. If she fumbled, if she showed fear, Victor would smell the blood in the water. Silas's phone call from the hotel room was the bait. This was the interrogation. Chloe took a deep breath, letting the adrenaline crystallize into icy focus. She looked Victor dead in the eye, channeling the most difficult, high-maintenance clients she had ever dealt with. "Marley is full of surprises, Mr. Moretti," Chloe said smoothly, her voice steady and laced with casual arrogance. "Though I suppose to someone on the outside, his private life might seem like a mystery. Some men just know how to keep what's truly valuable completely hidden, until they choose not to." Victor's smile faltered for a microsecond. He hadn't expected her to hit back. Marley beside her let out a low, dark chuckle. "She has claws," Victor noted, his eyes narrowing. "Only for those who get too close," Marley said, his voice dropping an octave, carrying a chilling, absolute threat. "Enjoy the champagne, Victor. Stay away from the shadows." Marley guided her away, his hand moving from her waist to intertwine his fingers with hers. Once they were out of earshot, he leaned down. "That was brilliant. Where did you learn to lie like that?" "I manage weddings for billionaires," Chloe whispered back, her heart hammering against her ribs. "I deal with sociopaths every weekend." The night dragged on, a dizzying blur of fake smiles and whispered threats. But the real danger didn't come from the ballroom floor. It came 2 hours later, when Chloe stepped away to the powder room. Leo, Marley's massive bodyguard, stood guard outside the hallway, but the corridor leading to the restrooms was long and dimly lit, flanked by towering exhibits of ancient artifacts. Chloe splashed cold water on her wrists, trying to steady her shaking hands. She had survived Victor, but she knew this was only night one. As she pushed open the heavy oak door to leave the restroom, the lights in the corridor suddenly flickered and died, plunging the hallway into near total darkness. Chloe froze. The silence was absolute. Where was Leo? A faint scrape of leather against marble echoed from the far end of the hall. "Leo!" she called out, her voice trembling. No answer. Only the sound of footsteps, slow and deliberate, moving toward her. A glint of metallic light caught the faint, ambient glow from the ballroom. A blade. Panic seized her throat. She spun around, grabbing the heavy brass handle of the restroom door, but it was jammed, locked from the outside. The footsteps accelerated. A figure lunged from the shadows, grabbing her by the hair, throwing her against the wall. A gloved hand clamped over her mouth, suffocating her scream. "Victor sends his regards." A raspy voice hissed in her ear, the cold steel of a knife pressing against her throat. Suddenly, a massive shape erupted from the darkness. There was a sickening crunch of bone, a muffled groan, and the pressure on Chloe's throat vanished. She slid to the floor, gasping for air. In the dim light of the exit sign, she saw Marley. He didn't look like the polished billionaire from the ballroom. He was a force of pure, untethered violence. He had the assassin pinned against a marble pillar, his forearm pressed against the man's throat. Marley's eyes were pitch black, his face a mask of absolute fury. With a terrifyingly calm precision, Marley drove his knee into the man's ribs, snapping them, before dragging him to the floor and striking him across the temple with the butt of a heavy pistol. The man went entirely limp. Marley stood up, his chest heaving, his tuxedo jacket ruined. He looked down at his hands, then turned to Chloe. She was huddled against the wall, terrified. Not of the assassin, but of the man who had just saved her. She had just seen the architect at work. Marley slowly dropped to his knees in front of her, tossing the gun aside. He reached out, his hands hovering inches from her face, suddenly hesitant. "Did he cut you?" he asked, his voice rough, stripped of all its smooth armor. Chloe shook her head, unable to speak. Marley exhaled a shaky breath, his forehead dropping to rest gently against hers. "I told you I wouldn't let you fall," he whispered, his hands finally cupping her face. "I am so sorry, Chloe." In that dark hallway, surrounded by ancient relics and a bleeding hitman, the line between captor and savior shattered completely. After the gala attack, Marley abandoned the city, flying Chloe to a remote, heavily guarded estate in the frozen woods of Door County. Isolated from the world, the mansion became both sanctuary and prison. While Marley coordinated a ruthless counterattack against Moretti's empire, Chloe sat by the fire, piecing together the events that had pulled her into this chaos. Something didn't add up. When Marley assured her the threat was over, Chloe challenged him. Finlay Harley had given her the keycard that led her into the trap. That wasn't an accident. It was calculated. As she laid out the timeline, the truth hit Marley hard. Harley wasn't just laundering money. He was secretly funding Moretti's rise. Silas had been a pawn, not the mastermind. The real enemy had been hiding in plain sight. Realizing they had been chasing the wrong target, Marley's focus shifted instantly. With new purpose, he ordered the helicopter ready. This time, they weren't running. They were going hunting. The raid was surgical. Marley didn't send his street soldiers. He sent the encrypted evidence directly to a trusted, uncorrupted FBI contact, wrapping it in a bow. Within 3 hours, the FBI breached Harley's Gold Coast penthouse. Harley was dragged out in handcuffs, screaming about lawyers, his entire empire crumbling before the sun even rose. The red USB drive secured his fate, linking him directly to a dozen federal RICO violations and the financing of an organized crime war. With Harley removed and Victor's muscle destroyed, the war was over before it ever spilled into the streets. 2 days later, they were back in Marley's St. Regis penthouse. The sun was setting over the Chicago skyline, painting the city in hues of gold and bruised purple. The heavy blackout curtains were open. For the first time in his life, the architect was letting the light in. Chloe stood by the floor-to-ceiling window, wearing a simple white sweater and jeans, her packed duffel bag sitting by the door. Marley stood a few feet away, his hands buried deep in his pockets. On the glass coffee table between them sat a pristine beige envelope. "Inside is a new identity," Marley said, his voice void of its usual commanding resonance. It sounded hollow. "A passport, a clean social security number, and an offshore account with $5 million. The jet is waiting at O'Hare to take you to Geneva or anywhere else you want to go. You are completely untraceable. Victor is dead. Harley is rotting in federal lockup. You are free." Chloe stared at the envelope. It was everything she had prayed for when she first stepped into that bloody hotel room. It was an escape from the violence, the shadows, the terrifying world of Marley Costello. She looked up at the man who ruled the city. He wasn't looking at her. He was staring out at the skyline, his jaw clenched so tight a muscle ticked in his cheek. He was a monster to the world, a phantom who killed without hesitation. But to her, he was the man who had burned an empire to the ground to keep her safe. He was the man who had dropped to his knees in a dark hallway to check if she was bleeding. "Geneva is cold this time of year," Chloe said softly. Marley's head snapped toward her, his dark eyes wide with sudden, unfiltered vulnerability. "I have an event to plan next month," she continued, taking a slow step away from the duffel bag, moving toward the coffee table. "A charity gala for the Children's Hospital. It requires a lot of funding, and a very persuasive host." She reached the table, but she didn't pick up the envelope. Instead, she pushed it aside, stepping right into Marley's space. She looked up into the face that no one was ever supposed to see. "Are you sure about this, Chloe?" Marley whispered, his hands coming out of his pockets to hover over her hips, afraid to touch her, afraid to break the spell. "If you stay in this room, if you stay with me, there is no walking away. You know what I am." "I know exactly what you are," Chloe said, her hands coming up to rest flat against the solid wall of his chest, feeling the steady, powerful thumping of his heart beneath the crisp white shirt. "You're the only man who caught me when I fell." Marley let out a shuddering breath, the last walls of his solitary fortress crumbling to dust. He pulled her flush against his body, his mouth crashing down on hers. The kiss was desperate, consuming, a fiery collision of two completely different worlds fusing into one. She had walked into the wrong room, but as his arms wrapped around her, shielding her from the entire world, Chloe knew with absolute certainty she was exactly where she was meant to be. Was Chloe's choice a romantic victory or a dangerous mistake? If you think she should have taken the money and run to Geneva, let us know in the comments. Don't forget to like this video if you enjoyed the twists, share it with your fellow drama lovers, and subscribe with notifications turned on so you never miss our next real-life storytelling thriller.